Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
Shelia Stubbs of Madison is a Democrat running in the 77th Assembly District. Shelia, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much.
I've been to your campaign website. You have 7 important priorities. I want to ask you about one of those to begin with. You're a former probation and parole officer. One of your priorities is to reform Wisconsin's criminal justice system. Can you be more specific, please?
Absolutely. I think it's very important that we understand we have misplaced our values. We're spending more dollars in the Department of Corrections budget and on prisons than we are in education. And so it's important that we work on the front end of our system. Let's prevent people from being a part of the Department of Corrections. You know, we need to actually address residents, employment, support, treatment, and transportation. Those are the hierarchies that we need to do. And we need to make sure while people are incarcerated that they're getting mental health treatment. You know, over 60% of the people are returning back to the community without mental health services and substance abuse. And I think that it is time that we really go back and think about our priorities. Let's take those dollars that we've invested in prisons and put those dollars towards education. As a former probation and parole agent, I can say firsthand how many times I've seen men and women released from our adult systems get released without basics. And we're asking them to do all these conditions that have been given to them from courts. And so it's time that we realize the communities have not had the services that we need to actually be informative and to be able to help our citizens. So let's focus on alternatives to incarceration, diversion programs, and let's interrupt the pipeline for prisons.
Well, a big issue in the next budget is with the prisons in Waupun and Green Bay being built in the 1800s, closing the 2 juvenile prisons, whether we need a new state prison. I think in your answer you just said we don't, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would say as we look at our priorities, we need to think about how we've misplaced that. And again, I must say it firsthand, being a former probation parole agent and seeing it directly in the systems, we are just not doing a good job. And we need to make sure that we are providing mental health services to our most vulnerable people. But we must also recognize our communities are hurting when people are returning and we can't provide the necessary services.
Another one of your 7 priorities is reducing gun violence. What changes would you make in state gun laws, please?
Absolutely. I think it's very important that we recognize we need to change our policies directly. Universal background checks. You know, we need to take the guns out of hands of individuals that will harm themselves. We need to take the guns out of the hands of people who don't need it. So we must do universal background checks. In addition, we must remove military-style guns from our community. In addition to that, the final piece that I would say with that is stores that have guns. We need to lock them up when the stores are closed. Let's do that properly. In addition, we know what? Gun violence is like a public service, a public epidemic. It's everywhere. It's in our schools, it's with our children, and I must say our communities have been hurt so bad. So I will stand up to make sure we have tougher laws to protect our most vulnerable population, our children, our community. They should not go to school wondering if they're going to return home. But we are in a position to stand up for those policies, and that's what I would do. I did it then. I'm going to continue to do that now.
And you talked about schools. Another one of your top 7 is funding for schools. The current state budget, as you know, increased aid to public schools. Did it not increase it enough? Do we need another significant major increase in the next budget?
Absolutely. And I must say that it's really important to understand that our school systems just have been broken. Education is just not where it should be. And so it's really important to say not only are we going to increase, we need to make sure sustainability happens with it. So we need to actually say there was a freeze for the UW systems. We need to fund those cuts because the UW has already expected and received those cuts. So we need to make sure that we're putting funding there so they don't experience more cuts because the students can't get to those courses. The classes are going to be larger. And imagine if you're ready to graduate and you can't get the course. So we need to be held more responsible as lawmakers and be able to say, you know what, let's fund education as a priority. Let's fund a world-class university. It needs to be funded adequately. And I just don't think we've ever done that with the broken system that we have currently.
Staying on UW system funding, we're now in our 6th year of a tuition freeze for resident undergraduate tuition. To provide more money then, do we not need to freeze in the next 2 years in the state budget?
Well, I just think the point is with a freeze, it's fine. I support the freeze, but we need to fund the freeze. That's the problem. And I think I want people to understand that's the difference. We cannot afford for our UW systems to take any more cuts. Why should our students be held in a position that they can't take the courses that they need? We've heard UW point that out very clearly, and so we need to listen. We need to be effective, and that's what I've done. And we need to be bold and stand up and say, yes, we're going to give them a cut, but are we going to restore those cuts?
If we need 200, 300, I'm making up those figures, 200 million more, 300 million more for K-12 in the UW system, how would you find that money, source of revenue for that money?
I think it's our priority. I'll go back to our priorities. Right now, we're funding Department of Corrections and Prisons higher and at a quicker rate than we are education. So go back and prioritize and make education our priority. And I think it's easier to be able to look at it from that component. We've misplaced it. And so we need to go back, and then when we go back and we think about what is our priority, we'll be able to fund it without any major concerns.
Is there any change in state tax laws that you would push for as a member of the Assembly?
Sure.
Anything?
One of the things that I would do as an Assembly person is do what I've been doing firsthand. I've been listening. I would go to the UW partners and ask them, what do you need? And I think that's what makes you an effective legislature is you're listening. And then you stand up for beliefs and values that are easier. But you understand the importance of balance. But we must continue to fund and not cut. And that's what's been our problem.
The gridlock in the Capitol on how to pay for our highways, how would you solve that in the future? How would you pay for future highway and bridge?
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about our infrastructure. Our infrastructure is a big issue. Our bridges. We definitely need to repair our roads. They're crumbling. I've heard many of the Democratic candidates, governor candidates, and Republicans say about a gas tax. That's something I would be supportive of. I certainly want to see the details, but again, it's a bipartisan situation, and we're looking at saying, and we both agree, our roads are terrible. Okay. Let's figure out how to do it. So I'm open and would be supportive to a gas tax.
How many pennies have you thought about?
Well,
3, 4, 5 more?
I've not thought about pennies.
Okay.
I would need to see more details, but again, I would support a gas tax.
And there was a lot of talk in the Capitol last session about the potential of tolling. Your position on tolling?
Well, I don't know the specifics about tolling, but what I am interested in doing is making our roads better and repairing them. Gas taxes, I would definitely do.
You're a member of the Dane County Board?
Love it, yes.
Okay. And you served on there for how long?
13 years.
My question involves levy limits. Local governments deal with levy limits since about 2006. Some local officials say those levy limits are really hurting their ability to provide local services. Is it time to loosen levy limits or get rid of them?
It is time that we allow local municipalities and local governments to make those choices. They're closer to the people. Let's listen to what our constituents are saying. They know firsthand what's necessary. And what I say to the state is give back control to the local elected government because they know firsthand the importance of local control. They know how to balance the taxes. They know what they're hearing constituents say. They know if constituents are saying, let's do a referendum. We need to go back and, again, be a partner and listen to local government because local government is the closest to the people and they hear it firsthand.
So get rid of levy limits?
Again, I think local control needs to
Okay.
decide that.
Another one of your 7 priorities is healthcare for all. Let's talk about healthcare. Do you envision then, is the ultimate answer a national universal healthcare system?
Absolutely. We need to make healthcare affordable for all. We need to take away a lot of provisions that limit people. We need to receive and accept federal funds for Medicaid. I mean, that is something that I would stand up, I would fight for, I would advocate for. Let's get federal dollars in here. Every Wisconsinite should have insurance and have affordability, and that's what we do. We need to do away with so many restrictions, and let's think about how do we really reach the people. And that's what this conversation is about, doing something very bold, making sure that I stand up as I'm knocking on doors. That is huge. Healthcare. I want to continue to be that voice for legislature to be bold and stand up for healthcare.
Does state government have a role in retaining and recruiting healthcare professionals like nurses, physicians, and other medical specialists? Excuse me.
I think so. I think what the state should do and should continue to do is work with local government. I mean, that's the piece. That is the beauty that I would bring in from a local elected component, is saying that this is what we need. And the state, we need you to be a partner, all levels of government, the state and federal, and learn to work with our local hospitals and providers and saying, how do we do a model that works for Wisconsin, that's best for our constituency, to make affordability for healthcare accessible for all.
The 77th, of course, is the City of Madison district, but I want to ask you about rural healthcare. In the rural areas, they have an older demographic, their high school graduates are leaving, and household income is less than the state average, and more healthcare is being provided by Medicaid and Medicare. Your thoughts on how to continue to provide accessible healthcare just in rural areas of Wisconsin, please?
Well, you know, living in Madison, I can say firsthand that is a conversation I would have with the other legislatures and say what's best for all of the state of Wisconsin. I certainly support an expansion of Medicaid. I mean, I support that. What does that mean as it reflects the rest of the state? Well, I'm in the position that I would listen. I can say as it relates to District 77, it's a top priority. It is something that we shouldn't have to sit and think about. Actually providing health care to all is what we should do. And that's what I believe my core belief is, and that's what I'm hearing at the doors.
Let's go back to K-12 issues. The voucher program has expanded in Wisconsin. Started out in Milwaukee, then Racine, now statewide. What's your position on the choice program, please?
Well, I oppose the voucher program.
You oppose it?
I oppose it.
Should it be done away with?
It should be gone.
Okay.
It certainly needs an overhaul. I just believe public dollars should fund public schools. We should not be funding private schools with public dollars. We should not be providing dollars to a charter school that's not connected with a school district. We should not do that. I can say that I am a proud graduate of a public school. My daughter is at Glendale Elementary School here in Madison, and she's getting a wonderful education. And so we need to go back, and I'm just going to say it very clear, public dollars should be used for public schools.
Had you been in the Assembly, how would you have voted on the tax incentives, tax breaks for the potential Foxconn development?
Well, I can say right now that the Foxconn development certainly is not something I support. I mean, our environment, we need to protect our environment. We need clean air. We need clean water. I can say this, that I wasn't at the legislation, so I don't have the opportunity to review the specifics of the policy, but I can say now, as I'm knocking on doors, people want our environment to be restored back. And as a person of color, an African American, I can say firsthand, you know, environmental justice is critical. We need to make sure communities of color is getting clean air and clean water. And that's something I've always stood up to, is protecting our environment and restoring that back to DNR.
Position on both medical marijuana and the potential of legalizing recreational marijuana?
I support it.
You do? Okay. You want to elaborate on why?
I support it. It's just that As I've heard people talk about it, I've met with constituents, I've heard it. It is something that I support, and that's just what it is. It's necessary. And if I'm hearing constituents say that, I'm supportive of it.
The governor and lawmakers have passed a number of bills called the HOPE agenda to deal with the epidemic of methamphetamine, opioids, and heroin epidemics. Your thoughts on next step to fight those epidemics, please?
Sure, but first of all, let's understand it's a bipartisan situation.
Yes.
You know, the opioid crisis, it doesn't matter your demographics, your age, it's an addiction.
Yes.
And I think this is one of those issues that we could work together on, bipartisan. First of all, we need to treat it as a public health issue. It is an epidemic. It is spreading, but we need to keep the awareness out there, and we need to be able to stand up as quickly as we can and wrap our hands around this epidemic, because it is destroying families. It's destroying our communities, and it saddens me that we are here in America and we are not getting control of this opioid epidemic. And I will stand up and say, let's work together on it. Let's work on providing access. So Medicaid, let's get the services, mental health services covered. I mean, that is something that we can do. We can look at provisions and make sure they're available for everyone that needs that kind of service.
And then final question, it's an open seat without an incumbent. Do you want to, and the primary is August 14th. Do you want to talk about differences between you and your opponents on August 14th?
Absolutely. Like one, it's really important to understand that it's an open seat. I have the endorsement of Therese Purcell, a retiring state representative.
Who's
Absolutely.
leaving the office?
Who's leaving the office after 20 years. And I think she knows firsthand what this district needs. This district needs a fighter. It needs someone who's going to continue to stand up and increase dollars for our UW systems and our K-12. Someone who's going to stand up to protect women's rights. Someone who's going to stand up and protect our clean air and clean water. Someone who's going to stand up to gun control, tougher laws. Someone who's going to make sure that we have access for health care to everyone. Someone who's going to stand up and reform our criminal justice system. And someone who's going to stand up to expand dollars for our seniors, our most vulnerable populations and people with disabilities. This is something that I'm a proven leader. Okay. I have a track record. I stand boldly, I'm effective, and I'm passionate. This district needs someone who will continue to fight for our rights that are being so disenfranchised at this moment. And so that is a huge difference between me and my opponents. In addition, I have experience. I am the only elected official in this race that have a proven record. I've been doing this work for 13 years, and I am ready on day one to continue to do the work on behalf of all of the constituents of District 77 and stand up for all of our brothers and sisters in this struggle. I'm ready day one, and that makes a difference in this race. Experience does matter.
Thank you. Shelia Stubbs of Madison is a Democrat running in the 77th Assembly District. The primary is August 14th. Shelia, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.